that.
What do we got to do first? Roll call.
All right, roll call. Mr. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Fielmesker?
Here.
Mr. Gifford?
Here.
Mr. Jessic? Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. LaSalle?
Here.
Mr. McEnroe?
Here.
Mr. Mahoney? And Mr. Meyer.
Okay. Do I hear a motion or any corrections on the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
I hear a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, let's move on. Looks like we're at minutes. We did that. Okay. In agenda, anything we want to move up on the agenda?
Well, I was just thinking about that. Scott Archer, or is that who's presenting the?
Possibly next month. Scott Archer cannot present this month, so under communications, it's just an informational that he would like to present at the November TAC meeting.
Oh, okay. Okay, so he's not going to be here.
Right.
Okay.
So
Good
then-
afternoon, sir.
Anything else?
How are you doing?
Citizens' comments. Okay. New business, Public Works report.
All right.
I think I have a few of these that are on my shoulders, and then a couple for John. Just find my right spot here. So, as many of you recall, the majority of us were able to attend the Kanema walkthrough last month. We had put out tubular speed and volume counts to get some additional data. It's not one of our normal locations where we have that information. I just got the counts and the volume data on Monday. So I spent most of the day working on that, but that report's not done. So, considering the fact that I just got it Monday, I'm going to be requesting a deferment until next month, and then I'll give you a staff report on that.
Okay.
So no updates on the Kanema questions outside of that. I appreciate you guys conducting the walkthrough. I'm sure the neighborhood appreciates it. And we'll take into consideration the comments that I had received. I gotten one other resident that gave me an email with some suggestions. And then what we had brought up during the walkthrough is some possible items. John, you got citywide slowdown.
So this was an idea that we talked about briefly at the last meeting. It's some kind of a campaign. One of the suggestions that, what we've seen in the past is slow down signs that the county had. We saw them on our walkthrough. If you were on the walkthrough, there was a version of that was taped to or bolted, actually, nicely bolted to one of the street sign posts. Something similar to that, only maybe even a little more creative. I guess what I'm thinking about is something that this group could sponsor, maybe even a grant application to acquire some kind of signage that would be available. Similar, I like this idea, and we checked with B&B Leasing. We haven't got a full response yet. The initial response was positive that they would be interested in it, but something whereby you could either have a series of stickers that might promote neighborhood safety or neighborhood speed controls. Something that you would roll out once a week, and you'd have it on your garbage can, and it would roll away when you rolled your garbage can away. So it might be a little more of a not as routine for a driver as they've driven through. So that was just an idea. I think to do that, we'd probably want some creative artwork, and there might be a need for an artist or something to do something like that. I'm not sure how artistic we'd want to get with something like that, but we could, that might be, there might be a couple of slogans. I don't know if you've noticed, but Clackamas County has in the past, they've got some signal safety and pedestrian crossing safety on some of our signal control cabinets. They did that a couple of years ago, and so haven't made much progress on this item other than we think B&B Leasing might be willing to utilize their trash cans if that's the avenue that we go down. But I do think that in order to move this too far forward, funding would be an issue. We'd have to probably pursue some kind of a public safety grant or Safe Routes to School grant or something like that. And so just still conceptual. I don't know that we actually talked much about it, so we could talk about it more if you have ideas.
Did you talk to B&B?
We did talk to B&B. The owner's out of the country, or has been evidently for a while, but we did talk to the operations manager, who sounded pretty favorable for the idea. But we want to make
It
sure
would be
that the
cool
owner's okay
to have a
with that.
life-size cutout sticker of a child looking like it's just ready to run into the street.
Think that would be effective?
I think it would. You know, when they had that artwork at the bottom of 7th Street there, those two figures, even though I knew they were statues, it still gave me pause
I slow down for
to,
them.
to see every time, you know, there's two people look like they're ready to cross the street right now, you know, and I couldn't see them, so, yeah, and I'm generally going really slow down there anyway, but it always looks like somebody's ready to jump out there.
Depot Bay puts a dummy in a police car and sits on the corner as you're coming into Depot Bay from the south end. And
That worked for me.
Well, I've seen in our neighborhood these plastic, I can see they're commercial products that are like a 3-foot high
Yeah, the green
kid
man.
with a little flag that hangs
Yes,
down.
yeah, I've seen those around a lot.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I actually looked into those. It's copyrighted.
Oh, yeah, I imagine.
Yeah,
it's
the
a-
cross. I think they're like Crosswalk Andy or something is the little walking kid, and they have the little flag.
It's a bona fide
That's a
product.
copyrighted product.
Crosswalk Andy?
Yeah,
Can we
It's
come
got
up
a
with
name.
Crosswalk Angie?
I'm not going to be the lawyer that takes that
Oh.
one on, but yeah, those are actually copyrighted. We thought about
You
that.
could buy them from the company, I presume.
Yeah, you can buy them.
Yeah.
Sure, well, somebody does.
We're thinking more something mounted, or either mounted, on its own placard that would go on the trash can, or if it's just a sticker, something that could be provided to the property owners through a grant. Again, a grant would fund those. We would ask, provide them with some information, and
What's the regulation about putting signs like that up on utility poles?
you
we
okay?
typically don't want to do that. I mean, PGE's opposed to that kind of installation. We see it. We've done it in limited instances with our own signs, but we try not to do that. So a sign like that, we wouldn't.
So where would you be able to post them?
On the
You mean
road.
if we didn't post them on the trash can?
Yes.
Yeah, then I think they could be anywhere in the planter strip, for instance. We'd want the thing that I'm a little more concerned with is compliance with our sign code. I think if they were in and out on a daily basis, that's one of the reasons why I like the trash can idea, because it's very temporary. But it comes up around town on garbage day, and there's 2 or 3 garbage days in town that would benefit from something like that. So I was a little concerned about some kind of a typical small garage sale size kind of sign that sat out there and stayed out there, and then became more of the visual clutter that doesn't seem to ever go away in this town.
Where would a grant like that come from?
Well, I think Safe Routes to School may be an opportunity for
Oh,
that. I think there's probably some public safety dollars that we may be able to pursue. We haven't talked to police about it yet, or at least I haven't.
I haven't either.
Yeah, police may have some funding for that. I guess we haven't taken it too far. It's still an idea, concept, and I'm kind of assuming you guys would support that.
I think it's a good idea myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
B&B Leasing may also be willing to help with the funding.
They may.
When you mentioned citywide slowdown, I thought it was going to be like a day of awareness. Just ask everybody to try to drive 5 miles below the speed limit. Nobody would do it, but if it was promoted enough, and there would, other than the promotion of that event, there wouldn't be any cost.
Yeah, you're right. I was thinking of maybe 2 or 3 neighborhood safety signs. So there might be 2 or 3 different looks to what one might be specific to the drivers to slow down. The other might be more specific to again, safe routes to school or pedestrian safety. Those so.
Does the city still do the neighborhood night out?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
National Night Out.
That was last month and a half ago.
That one might be in a topic for that.
Topic. They don't.
Oh,
It's,
it's-
normally, that's a
Event.
it's an event. So they have booths. So if we had those kind of say stickers and we wanted to
What-
hand them out, that would be a good opportunity for that.
Oftentimes there's like speakers or little events or something going on for them too.
Yeah, I think once we come up with an artwork and the ability to acquire, if it's a sticker or a sign, then getting the word out on that seems like either through the neighborhoods or through, just a direct, mailing.
The thing, he has to come up with one that doesn't have copyright.
Maybe we utilize B&B leasing for that portion. Maybe that's their contribution. That they, if the garbage can scenario were to play out.
In that case, it would have to be a sticker that fixes
Right.
to the side.
So that's all I have.
Okay?
We'll keep working on that.
Okay, 6, communications.
But we're still on
Yeah.
Public Works report.
You still got some more of that?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought that was, you said.
So fast.
Sorry. Didn't mean to pull the rug out from under you there.
That's all right. I was trying to make a record to get out of here.
We may still be on track.
This guy's
I'll
gotta
make
go
it
out
quick.
and pound the pavement.
So, one of the things we wanted to keep you guys abreast of is our, our capabilities and how we keep expanding our program to kind of keep ourselves relevant and provide the taxpayers a good product at a reasonable price. So, one of the things that we acquired this year, we had put it into our biannual budget as an acquisition for this year, was a new milling machine. So this is a 1 meter path milling machine. If you're not familiar with the milling machine, the intent of it is basically to shave off layers of asphalt just before you get to the rock base, and then from there you can lay on new asphalt. Typically, if you've been driving up or down Washington or any of the PMUF areas, it's a perfect example of a full road width milling machine. They'll come in and make a clean cut. We only need a 1 meter. We primarily try and focus on the smaller jobs. So for the wheel rut paths or the potholes area, those kind of jobs we can handle with this piece of machinery. And we've just finished a large section of Central Point Road, which we've heard for years, and it wasn't high enough to get onto our PMUF program with the pavement maintenance utility fee. But we knew it was a problem, and this new assets kind of allowed us to try and address that. So I think you guys have on your monitors, you can see a little bit better than what we have with the glare here on the screen. This is the new machine. It's a Wortgen model. It's out of Germany. It is probably one of the top of the line, top 3 machines out in the industry right now. The base cost for this was $246,000. Puts it up there in one of our higher catalog assets. What the machine does is it's traveling down the wheel rut path, mills off anywhere from as little as an inch. We can do as deep as a 3-inch mill. It takes all of the asphalt, what we call the millings, and shoots it out through the conveyor belt at the rear, and then allows us to collect it into a dump truck and basically haul off the material. This is an incredible improvement in efficiency over our current capability. The piece of machinery that we currently had, this was a 3-piece of equipment, 4-piece of equipment technically, project that was not as smooth as what we have now. We've basically refined it down to a 2-piece of equipment process, 2 operators. The only thing that really slows this down is we don't have enough dump trucks to keep loading the material into, so we have to fill, send it to dump, and then bring back the dump trucks.
Martin, is that really going to the dump, or can't that be recycled?
We're selling it back to the manufacturer.
I would think, yeah.
So what we're trying to do is we've found a location. It's not who we're buying our asphalt from, unfortunately. What we're working on right now is trying to find a vendor where we can buy asphalt, sell them the millings, and then I get reduced price on the asphalt. I don't have that in place yet. What we're very cognizant of is the materials that we get out of this. I don't want a giant stockpile of Mount Montalvo growing down there at the cove of millings. And we have been able to liquidate the majority of everything that we've milled off of Central Point. It was not a cost savings for us. We weren't able to recoup any cash for it, but we found a vendor that's willing to take it and alleviate us of the disposal costs. So as far as I don't have to pay to dispose of it, I'm looking at it as a win-win. If I can find someone that will give me a break on asphalt cost, by giving them the millings for recycling into their aggregate, then all the better, but I haven't gotten there yet.
Might not the Cove be looking for a cut and fill? I mean, aren't they going to be doing some cut and fill on the Cove?
I have enough material stored down there that
Yeah, we are in a floodplain down there, so there's the other challenge, which is too much fill
Yeah.
without balancing that. So
Is it typical for cities to buy these kinds of machines as opposed to leasing or subcontracting?
there are several other communities in the area that have this exact same machine. Gresham has this exact same machine. Hillsborough has two machines, not the same vendor, but they have two machines similar to this. For the rest of the communities of our size, we're the first to acquire one of these. Okay. I'm on a group that it's an IGA, intergovernmental group, that we specifically focus on mutual aid agreements in preparation for disasters. And our focus is always staff and equipment. And if you're hit and I'm not, how can I help you? Mm-hmm. So we share equipment lists, we share resources, we share capabilities, and we're always talking about what can you guys do now on non-emergencies where you can potentially help us or I can help you. So perfect example, Marion County. Center line striping is required to be done annually for all communities. They do all of the center line striping for Tillamook County, the entire county. And it's all done through a mutual aid agreement. The mutual aid agreement allows us to help one another, not just during an emergency, but day-to-day operations. Hillsborough does a very similar mutual aid agreement for, I forget which community it is, for all of their crack seal. The county does a lot of work for us for our crack seal and our striping. I actually was at a APWA conference with John this week, and the word got out pretty quick that we got a milling machine, and I've already gotten a request for, hey, are you guys going to be potentially helping other communities with some minor milling jobs? And it's opportunities for us, for our operators, develop increased expertise, because I don't have enough work to keep it busy year-round, and for us to build goodwill with the other communities.
Maybe we could barter with them for signs for the neighborhoods.
Yep.
Kind of the way it works.
It is a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, but it does help us kind of build that rapport with the other communities. I haven't given them a reply yet, and I'm not going to say who it was, but
Since we ground down Jackson Street, that was private contractor.
Mm-hmm.
How much did that cost us? Just the grinding part.
Oh, I couldn't tell you. It wasn't my project. I don't know off the top of my head.
yeah, typically my recollection is we pay about $3 a square yard for the grinding piece. They've got wider machines,
Yeah.
so it's
To
more
what
efficient.
depth?
Yeah, their efficiency's a lot better.
And I'm just curious, is that would be Wyatt that would do like a break-even analysis and say, well, we could spend $200, but if we just lease it or subcontract it, with the maintenance cost to maintain it and the insurance,
we already bought them.
So I assume that goes into the mix of. I'm just curious as to how the decisions are made on that. And
Typically, we look at a piece of equipment, and this piece of equipment has been a discussion item for several years. Should we do milling? Shouldn't we do milling? How much paving should we do? Should we concentrate on just that, or should we contract all that work out? And so, in this case, we didn't do a lease. Well, we did look at lease options.
Look at a lease option.
Just like for street sweeping is another good example that we're looking at lease options, or is there another option? For the most part, the equipment wear and tear, it's a little bit hard. It's usually more likely that you're going to hire the contractor that's going to come in and mill this. And then there's the coordination piece that we kind of struggle with. So I don't recall us doing a detailed cost analysis on
We did
what
do an
the
RI
options
on
were.
this. We did do it for our street sweeping equipment, and we looked at a lease option, a contract option, and continued acquisition option, because it's one of those things that we're looking at for the next budget cycle. And comparably, the lease option, lease with an option to buy at the end versus just a straight out acquisition, it's easier for us to buy it on the long run of, because the amount of years that we get out of a piece of equipment versus the lease, we wind up losing money in the long run. We're leaving money on the table essentially. And it also allows us the capability of direct control versus the contract option. So we've looked at those as well. A couple of other communities do contract option for their street sweeping. The only thing you get with that is a set number of runs across designated routes. It doesn't give you the latitude of, I need it here tomorrow. And you don't have that kind of control.
Martin?
Yeah.
I can maybe plant an idea here. I did a water line installation using one of these narrow millers for trench work.
We already have that on the table. But I appreciate you thinking down the same path that we did. It helps us. The work that we did along Madison is the perfect example. This was last winter, so almost a year ago, 1,200 feet water main replacement. And the biggest complaint that we got was the current piece of equipment, what's called a zipper, is a mounted piece of equipment that goes in the front of a front end loader. And that's pushing through the road. Then you come back in with a separate piece of equipment and you pull out all the millings and load it and haul it and then sweep it. It's all these separate pieces of equipment. Biggest complaint was too many pieces of equipment, too loud, too much traffic congestion. So all of those things kind of play into this nexus of how can we get in here, do the best job that we can, and then also provide the best product with the least inconvenience to the residents. In the long run, this takes the spot of, I missaid it earlier, 4 different pieces of equipment. I can do it with 1 now. Still need the dump truck though.
And faster.
Significantly faster. The weak link on this is the dump truck. So this will give you an example of some of the
Don't have enough
issues that we were having with the asphalt. This is right there at the onset of where we began the full lane mill. And you can see this fortunately was top down cracking, not bottom up cracking. So by milling it, we were able to get to a point where we had still some good material underneath that we were simply able to do an overlay. But there were whole runs of Central Point that were pretty much consistent and like this. And it's primarily along the wheel path road. So if we can just mill that section out, put in an overlay, it'll give us a good 10 years back on the road before we really have to look at any further, more in-depth pavement work.
Typically, this is a full lane, but as you may have noticed on Central Point Road, a lot of it's just a meter wide. With our pavement program, we consider that stopgap kinds of, so it's not a full-blown overlay, but it gets us by. It helps us spread our dollars as far as we can. So some streets like Jackson or Washington will be able to go full curb to curb, but on where we just don't have the funding to make that stretch, these stopgap measures are great. It may be that in a couple years when we really kind of have that program or that street targeted, we may end up milling some of that off and repaving, but it's definitely a much better patch. And I was surprised. We've also got a new piece of equipment which we haven't showed, which is a small paving box, and it basically is the width of that meter wide trench, and it's pretty slick. I mean, I was amazed at how much footage they did with that one machine. Where we used to rake and use a dump box. Henry, you're probably familiar with that. We'd try and dump it out of the back of a hatch.
Oh, yeah.
on
I
the
don't
back
want
of
to think about that.
Yeah, and there was, it was rough and everything, and it's perfect now, and they do it so fast. It's just amazing.
Leighton box?
Unfortunately, the after picture here, we weren't able to get the striping in when I took the photo. So I'm not even sure if the striping's been finished yet,
Okay.
because we still
Come off
have,
too
we
soon.
just finished the last of the work today.
Could you give us an example of scratching each other's backs? What we might get in exchange to loan this to another
We
municipality?
don't loan,
front of the
so
picture.
it's
It's in front of
you
the
cover
picture.
our cost expenses associated with it. So it's not just we're going to go do your work for you. The exchange that we look for is,
There you go.
and again, this is something that's been asked. We haven't agreed to it. So if we went and did this for another community, they'd cover all of our expenses for the staff individual, because I won't loan the piece of equipment out without our operator on the piece of equipment. I don't want any ambiguity as to who's in charge of the equipment, or if something goes wrong, who's responsible. And they would compensate us for fuel, materials, anything associated with it that's an expense to us, we get compensated for. And that's in the IGA that we utilize. An idea of what potentially someone could help us with, any sort of resource where we need additional equipment, manpower, is something that's essentially on the table. I brought up the example of Hillsborough does crack seal for several other communities, and they've got a bang up crack seal program. We pay the county to do that currently for us. We get a good price from the county, cheaper than the actual private sector. But does that mean I have to stay with the county to do it, or can I ask Hillsborough possibly, can you come do it, and I get a slightly better price than I do with Clackamas County doing it? All of those things are on the table. And that is one of the very enlightening things that I like about how they're utilizing the IGAs here, these intergovernmental agreements. It's not just for when the poop hits the fan. It's day-to-day operations they're being utilized for. And it's small communities helping one another out, because not any one of us can do everything, but together we have a much more well-rounded program uniformly.
Does the county, for example, have the similar equipment?
County does have a milling machine. I'm not sure what the width of it is. I don't think it's a 1 meter. I think it's a 36 inch. So it's roughly the same, but there's different manufacturers make different different models, different widths.
Big difference between a meter and a yard, I guess.
Yeah, but like I said before you got here, there's a couple other communities that have them. Gresham's got them. Hillsborough's got them. Clackamas County's got one, and I think there's a couple other agencies that have them. I know Multnomah County's got a couple.
Definitely better than a backhoe.
I'll tell you this, the operators, in the long term, we're saving the city money, because I'm not going to have the degenerative disc issues and workman's comp claims associated with running the zipper. This is a very smooth ride. Operators love it. It's clean, it's efficient, it's quiet compared to everything else.
And it doesn't disturb the surface adjacent to it.
No. And if, Lisa, can you back up one photo? I want to show them the cut edge. One of the best things that we can get for laying new asphalt is a nice, clean seam. Okay? So you see how uniform these edges are? There's not a lot of breaking or shearing off. That helps us with laying down the new asphalt. I don't have these jagged edges where there's little cracks that I have to try and fill in with asphalt. This will give us a better seal. It gives us the opportunity to prevent water from getting into those areas and deteriorating the new inlay. All right. So that's my sell on the milling machine. Other thing you guys asked to look into, spoke with Oregon City School District regarding the school buses out there along Jackson Street, and they've agreed to discuss with their transportation people and with the bus drivers, and they'll be keeping a clearance distance from all of the striped crosswalks that are out in that area, so they don't have issues with them blocking the sight line for people trying to utilize the crosswalk. So I'll keep an eye on that and make sure that their ops managers actually talk to the transportation people and it's being carried through.
I have a question about
Sure.
school buses, just real briefly, is that when there are 4 lanes, and very specifically Beaver Creek, heading towards 213 on Beaver Creek in the morning, buses stop right in front of, on what's the street there? What is it?
They stop in the 4-lane section, right? That's what you're getting
They
at.
stop at the intersection, and of course, the law says it has to stop in both directions, but when there's a divider in between,
If it's a divided highway, they do not have to stop on the opposing side.
that's what I thought. And yet, boy, so
But
many
I-
times I see, traffic backed all the way up to Fred Meyer's, and those people are down there on.
I think that's the way the law reads. I just think it's confusing for drivers to remember that particular law. So rather than forget and get a ticket, they're going to stop.
Rather than forget and hit a kid, they'll stop.
Yeah, I err on the side of caution. I know what the law is, and I stop because just because there's a divider doesn't mean that some kid isn't going to try and go that direction. I've seen it.
Run around the back of the bus and
Or the front.
Just err on the side of caution.
or get bicyclists to stop for the flashing lights too.
Or maybe keep the
Good luck.
skateboard riders out of the traffic flow.
So, one of the other items you guys had asked, and I'm just going through my checklist of things you've asked us to bring back. You wanted thermoplastic cost. So, just to give you an example, I pulled the work order from the
Thermoplastic is what?
thermoplastic for the crosswalks. Oh, I'm sorry.
Don't you know,
I'm like
John?
John.
You should have seen the look on your face, Mark.
For the crosswalks, a better product rather than just painting out the Continental Key crosswalks that we use. We use a product called thermoplastic. You get it's a laminate basically that you heat seal to the asphalt, and it gives you a better wear on that than paint. You'll get better visibility from it. There's actually some glass particulate that's broken into it, so that when a car's coming at night and the lights hit it, it pops a little bit more. It's a better product. It costs more than painting white across the street, but it's a better product. And we're consistently using that, and we're doing a pretty good job with it. So Squires Road, I pulled the work order for that because you guys had asked how much did that project cost. Because every time we get a request, everything has a cost. That was $934.31 when you calculate in materials, staff time, and equipment. So, and that was essentially, an average installation. It's a collector road. I think total width was not even sure.
But it's 2 lanes.
Yeah, 2 lane.
2-lane roadway.
So that's basically the ballpark. When I think last time we just off the top of my head, I told you it's probably about $1,000, and it's pretty darn close.
In a dry day.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is if you want it to last, we got to put it down in the right conditions. I don't want to waste money just trying to make someone happy by putting it down immediately.
So that's not the entire cost, though, for that installation. That's the thermoplastic cost and the laydown of the thermoplastic cost. I think you also need to keep in mind that we put advanced warning signage, for the pedestrian crossings. And once that thermoplastic goes down, if you notice, this is again why I always encourage people to try to avoid.
Yeah.
You guys need to avoid, because not the other drivers, they won't. But as you're driving down the road, try to stay off those white lines, because the wear and tear of those things, we got to put that back. And they might last 3 years,
3 years.
in a high traveled area. So that's an ongoing cost. From that point forward, once the crosswalk's in, guess what? It's probably never going to come out again. And so that's every year, or not every year, but every probably 3 years, we're in there at least touching it up, right? with
I think
new
the question
thermoplastic.
is, what's the difference in cost between thermoplastic and paint?
Well, the material cost is significant, but I think the laydown, I actually, I don't know that we've run that, but there's a lot more time involved in doing the laydown for paint.
Okay,
The
so it costs more
laydown
to
for
lay-
thermoplastic is it's laying it out, but it's laying it down and you just burn it in. So paint, you got to lay down your templates, you bring out your paint machine, clean up your paint machine. The cleanup's a lot more.
So
too,
the next question is, how long does it last?
Paint doesn't
Paint,
last very long.
annual.
Yeah, paint is an annual kind of a deal. So we do we use our seasonals usually to do neighborhood stop bars, for instance, in a residential area. And, again, it really depends on how much traffic, but, for us, so we basically send someone out with that template and the spray machine, and they either spray that down, or we've even used rollers to do that.
Perfect example of how long you get out of a paint. just look at painted curbside for some of the no park areas. Code enforcement, they have their seasonals, typically do a lot of that. And it's just paint on raised curb. It's not taking any traffic weight.
Too much,
And they paint
yeah.
that every year, the exact same locations. There's one location, I've been here 2 years. They had the seasonals doing it one summer. They had them doing it again this summer. So it doesn't.
I bet you the thermoplastic has numbers on that. If you talk to the company.
Life numbers? Is that what you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they do actually. Again, it's relation depends on the
Of
traffic.
course.
But
We
they
got
do.
studded tires, and some states don't have studded tires.
Yeah, it makes a
Fair
difference,
enough.
I'm sure.
Is that what they used on the new pavement at the bottom of Holcomb?
Thermoplastic for the
Center
arrows, the turnkeys, and on the stop bar and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty cool stuff.
We did as I'm remembering, we did a bit of a comparison when we started using the thermoplastic when I was here, and it was, roughly speaking, as I'm remembering it, about 4 to 5 times more expensive to use the thermoplastic than the paint, but it was about 6 times longer lasting. And with the pattern on the crosswalks that you're using, instead of having to do the entire crosswalk when you about every 5 to 6 months, you could do just the parts that were showing wear and tear and leave the rest.
Yeah.
So you're ahead of the game by.
Well, I'll give credit to our staff. They've really got it dialed in, and they've got the spacing on these almost perfect for each. You know, each application is unique, obviously. They get the spacing done. Jan spaces them out just enough where we've got the bars outside of the wheel path, and it's just the edges that we need to come in and lay down new thermo every few years. Everything outside of those wheel paths, typically we can get maybe 5 years out of that.
Yeah.
And when we were using paint for those same locations, we were getting about 3 months, and there wouldn't be any paint in the wheel path.
So
And that was in the summer without the studs.
that was the update I have for you on that. And then the only other update I have for you that you guys had asked for was, and this was an item from a few months ago. You'd asked us to contact ODOT regarding the flashing yellow arrows at several locations. So I have given you an update on the ones that the county had investigated for us. So we've been working with ODOT over the last month, and we've gotten some changes to the ones along 99E, and I'll just kind of read these out to you very quickly. So 99E and 14th, based on the traffic information that we provided to them, looking back at historic versus since the changeover, they've decided at 14th and 99 to turn off the flashing yellow turn arrow in the morning and in afternoon peak periods, based on the information that we provided for them. There's enough queuing distance there that people can still queue, and disabling them during those peaks isn't going to cause a major problem. Re-enabling them off-peak just allows those people who are waiting there to not wait, to just pass through with good visibility and relative protection. 10th and 99 is still under analysis, so we don't have a change in that pattern yet. 14th has already gone into place. 12th and 99, there's no traffic accident information to support any change there, so it stays the same. 2nd and 99 had some significant changes that required.
No, they didn't have changes there.
2nd, oh, not, yeah, that was from the. It's the second email that came through.
I think basically the 2nd Street intersection, they weren't finding a lot of information there to support the change, so we're still working on that one.
Okay.
You may have mentioned it. Did you say 10th was they're going to?
10th is still under analysis.
Still good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't have a change on that one. Frankly, to get these many of them looked at and analyzed in this period, I'm happy with that. We're working well with Doug Anderson, who's our coordinator over at ODOT for those. And we're still working on 2nd and 10th, but all the rest of them that needed to be changed have been modified. That's all I got, gentlemen. Trying to go for a land speed record here for you.
I actually had a comment from this morning when I was out walking the dog about crosswalk on Fifth Street by the Pioneer Center, and I included that in my email. But basically, somebody said, you know, it's strange that we have John Adams with marked crosswalk, but Fifth Street back and forth across to the Pioneer Center doesn't have one at that spot.
John Adams at 6th?
Fifth.
Oh, there is a marked crosswalk at 5th?
5th and Washington, there's crosswalk.
Fifth and John Adams does not have one going across Fifth Street, but John Adams
Going
has
across
one
Fifth
going
Street or going across John Adams?
Going across Fifth Street, there's no marked crosswalk at that intersection.
That's
Okay.
right.
Going across John Adams, there's one on each side. So we end up with the minor streets having marked crosswalks at that spot and the major street without one.
Yeah, I
Well,
think
there is one at Washington. I just watched them put down that
Oh,
thermoplastic
yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Washington and Center both have them, and there's at 6th and John Adams they have
I
them.
think that's mainly because there's stop controls
Yeah,
on the
sure.
on the John Adams side, but there's not on the 5th. So, we could put crosswalks up at every intersection.
Well, I know, but
So
And-
it's back to balancing that. But I think for the majority, depending on the amount of traffic and the speed of that traffic on a boulevard, we typically don't like to put striped
Right.
crosswalks.
Yep.
And we've done some of these mid-block crosswalks, like what Martin just reported on at out on Myers Road, and
right.
but on those
But
less
the-
so on these gridded sections.
But I said I would mention it, so I mentioned it.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, you can tell them it's $1,000 a leg.
Next time I hear that, I will mention that.
Yeah, and just go down to 5th and Washington, and you'll get an idea. That's $4,000 in thermoplastic that we have invested there. So, all right. Thank
That's all we have.
Okay, communications, that's the Parks Master Plan presentation. Do we have that?
Should be next month,
Next
November
month.
meeting. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Legislation text, staff report, future agenda items.
I have a couple.
Go ahead.
Very specifically, there are two major projects going on in the city that I don't know that the TAC got involved in officially or not. One specifically was the Blue Heron Master Plan, and there were 3 options that are being considered right at the intersection there of Main Street and 99, and they labeled them A, B, and C. And that was the first time I'd really even seen that. And I don't know, was that before I got here, or did they run that by us as to the planning that they're making on that? And-
It was run by us. I
Okay.
think it's before you,
Okay,
about a month before you showed up.
okay.
They came and
Kinda-
presented a couple times to the TAC, and again, I think it was prior to your tenure here.
Okay. The second one is the, I've been watching a lot of the library presentations, and she talked about, Maureen specifically talked about the traffic studies that are going to be done around Carnegie Park. And I imagine that we're going to be seeing the results of those.
Well, we haven't been bringing land use traffic studies. I mean, every development in town has a traffic study associated with it, or most significant ones. So we typically don't bring those before the TAC. I mean, there's a lot of transportation-related issues that happen out there that don't necessarily come before TAC. Now, if that's one that the library has been to present, or will be here to present. I'm trying to remember if that's something that's come before us. Do you guys remember?
That's been before us once.
Yeah.
So,
Well, now that they have the plan decided on which way they're going to go on that.
yeah, for the building,
Yeah.
this committee wouldn't really be involved in the
Not in the building, no.
at all. The transportation analysis we typically wouldn't bring before the TAC, but we sure can if that's one of those special projects. But that this group wants to hear. But normally, land use related transportation reports we don't.
And one more project, and that is going to be the hospital master plan. When Willamette Falls Hospital has its plan done, and they made a presentation, as you are aware, to the Business Alliance, and they talked about asking us to reconsider a spur off of 213 to come up to access the hospital. That, I think, is a significant transportation issue.
Yeah.
But I think that, we ought to talk about that.
It did the conversation did generate a lot of discussion. So were you there? I can't remember. Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of.
Anchor Wave probably won't cut it.
I got.
Yeah, exactly.
I got a different. So they have a master plan that they created. Now, if they're doing an amendment to that, there was some question. Tony and I had a conversation about that as to,
I'll bet.
well, what exactly is different about what they're proposing? I mean, they're basically proposing to implement their master plan. I don't know that they're proposing to change that much. So whether there's a land use process that goes through adoption of their, amendments to their master plan, we're still kind of unsure about that. When I did sit through that presentation, what I heard was implementation of their existing master plan.
And yet, I don't recall that master plan was ever approved by the Planning Commission, was it?
Well, I think it was. I can check, William, but
Because I know before they were acquired by Providence, I know Denise McGriff and I were working with them on that master plan when as part of because that's part of the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association when I was chair. And then when Providence came along, that whole master plan got put on the shelf.
well, maybe
Because
that's
Providence
the
wanted to
status.
look at
I
it,
got
and
I
I
got the
never heard-
impression from Tony that it had been approved. So I'll ask that question
I
and
think
find
that
out the status
surprised
of the master
David
plan.
Frazier, too.
Yeah, because I was under the impression they had an approved master plan.
Well, we might want to nail that down.
Yeah.
And my experience has been that any amendments that make a change to an approved plan would require going through a new approval process, but that any thing that would be a slight alteration but not change the meaning of the
Spirit
plan
of the plan,
would
yeah.
be still covered.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I mean, and I don't think what I heard was much different than what I was under the impression was in their approved master plan. So I'll get an update on that and either have, we could have them, we could have the hospital attend this meeting as well if that was something.
Well, for this committee only, of course, we're only interested in the traffic aspects of that master plan.
Right.
But it seems to me as though if there really is an approved master plan, somebody ought to know about it.
And if it's a spur coming off, is it just going to be for emergency vehicles, or is it going to be other people?
Their master plan doesn't include a spur off of 213, and ODOT has been reluctant to have something like that proposed. So that would be significant, and there's a pretty big question about how that would be funded.
The only place I can think of would be across Clackamas Water's well site.
Yeah.
And that
That
hillside so
would
unstable.
cross Redland and cross, Newell Canyon. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just saying it's a big idea. That I think the point that wasn't real clear in that meeting, mostly because I hadn't thought about it or didn't make it, but we've got 15th, we've got actually 12th. I suppose you could spend some money to get 12th to go through, and you've got 9th. They all come through to division. You could build a interchange and flyover, because it'd either be a right in, right out kind of scenario on 213, or you'd have some kind of a flyover that would get you back, going, the other directions. You'd spend, again, I don't know if it's 100 million or not, but that's what I said. It's probably, somewhere between 50 and 100 million, and that's just the region does not have the funding for that kind of facility. So it's,
Nor
but
Providence
you
will
could
fund it.
probably spend a couple of million and maybe extend 12th through to division. That's probably a better solution. But I get that Anchor Way is a little challenging for,
Speaking of Newell Canyon, is it possible to have Metro come in and talk about their plans for Newell Canyon for their park development?
October 28th.
Yeah, it's October 28th at the Pioneer Center, which we won't have a crosswalk for, but
you'll still be able to get there though.
but
It does not need to be striped for you to
We'll make 'em
employ the
safety
crosswalk
patrol.
rule. You know that.
But
You know better.
the thing that got to me though was after our walkthrough at Kanema, where Metro had the park down there without any parking lot on a residential street, and this plan that they've seen so far talks about making connections into their park from our residential streets. It might seem like it'd be necessary for them, some way to force them to include some parking.
I had heard that there is some, and I'm just speaking of this very locally, because 3 houses down from me, Metro is negotiating to buy the property at the end of, basically where Warner Milne comes up between Bank of the West and those storage units things, the Pizza Hut there. Right past the storage units there, they want to extend that down, and they're planning, and they're purchasing that. They've already hired contractors to come through, and they've already finished mowing all the blackberries and so on there. And I talked to the guy that was, I guess, I don't know if he was a supervisor or what, about doing that mowing, and they said Metro wanted to see if there was any metal trash or anything underneath there, but they mow that every couple of years. But they're in negotiation. They hope to have that signed in less than a month. And one of the other neighbors who was talking to them said, yeah, Metro's planning on putting a parking lot up at the top of that.
And Fox, right?
I think this
yeah,
needs some
well,
clarification.
Fox, Otter, and Beaver.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think the source here is, if you're talking to the guy running the mower, probably not exactly the right source. But I would say we have not seen any indication through the planning department that they're planning any new impervious areas or any site development.
Oh, Metro met in this room last Thursday, and then they had a big reception up at the High Cliff.
There's an article in the paper.
And there's going to be a public presentation on, the 28th?
Where, for a parking
On the
lot?
28th.
For a parking lot.
Are you talking about the Kanema's Children's Park improvements?
No.
No, this is
Newell Creek Canyon.
You guys were at the APWA.
The Metro.
That's what it was. We were at the wrong conference.
The Metro counselors, they periodically meet at different cities, and so they met here last week, and so
It's 2007.
they had some discussion about Newell Creek and
About parking lots and
yeah,
site
what-
development.
And
Yes.
the gal, as I recall, the gal that mentioned it said, "It's a little premature. I shouldn't be saying this."
She probably shouldn't have.
Right.
So got in a newspaper.
But
It was in the
uh,
paper, yeah.
Well,
But on the 28th
let's be clear that I know that they're planning to provide access to the park
Right.
in various ways, and there may be triggers for more parking, whether that be on-street parking or something else. But I don't know that they've finalized at least their concept plan for how that.
No. That'll be mid 2015.
So I think the point that we might want to have a presentation on what they're planning for Newell Creek Canyon would be good. I just don't know that they're really that far into that, and lots of times we don't get too excited about it until we see something come through the land use.
Knowing who the project manager is for that, I would suggest having more advanced rather than later would be a good idea.
Well, they are going through a public process.
Right, and we'll be at the meeting next week. But
What other meeting is this one?
there's a public meeting at the Pioneer
Oh.
Center about the presentation for this, and the last meeting they talked about various public access things like trails, riding trails, general play area, recreation areas and such, picnic areas, but generally people attracting spots.
So there are 4 open house that they have between like mid this year to mid next year, and then they'll finalize their plans. So this is, I believe, the second public meeting on Newell Creek.
At least the second one here.
I was just corrected by text. The boss says that it's an access point, not a parking lot.
That makes sense, but we'll look into Metro, and should probably be more up to date with the Newell Canyon plans, because I've been a little, I know, what we have seen is their viewpoint on
Kenema Bluff.
the Kenema Bluff project. That just, that land use piece just came through, so that's,
Oh yeah, they're showing
That's one.
slides of what's that's going to look like.
yeah.
Nice.
But based on our walkthrough with Kenema and what the neighbors were saying about the attraction of that and the problems they were having with people parking so they could use it, it strikes me that this is going to be much more of the same.
Yeah. The good news with Newell is there's a lot more access points.
Right.
It's also more area.
And there's a lot more people who want to use it.
On a related note, Metro is having what they call a conversation. It's this Thursday, so short notice, 9 a.m., and it's about natural resources. So they were going to have it at the Ainsworth, but they changed the venue to Singer Hill. So it'll be up in the loft at Singer Hill. I guess they didn't have a big turnout, so but any of you that want to attend that, 9 a.m. Thursday morning.
Can you give me a little more context as to natural resources? What specific?
Parks, so I'm sure Newell's going to come up in the conversation, Kenema.
Yeah. It sounds like I need to talk to Metro about that, because I'm not in the loop on a lot of that.
It's on a need-to-know basis, John.
That's right.
Somebody's playing in our sandbox, and they're not asking to use the toys.
I did have a couple of future agenda items. One doesn't have to be today, obviously, but because it's future. But an update on the Leland Lynn Myers Road project and kind of what the timeline is there. And another one is the train tracks coming across 10th. If we're going to create downtown residential, living units, that zone is going to have to be. It blows 25 seconds or 15 seconds from each direction before it crosses 10th, and so
You're talking quiet zone now.
quiet zone for the trains. It's very expensive, but I think the TAC should have that on its radar screen. And start thinking about that. I know there are people that are serious about getting downtown residential down there, and if we want to make that a really vibrant downtown area, the consensus is that you're going to need people living down there. So, but the quiet zone, that's a transportation issue, and it'd be nice to start getting the ball rolling. I know Eric Underwood has done some research. He emailed me some. Actually, I emailed him some UP items from the UP website that gives prices and price ranges and the specifics on what needs to be done to make that a quiet zone. And so thought we should talk about that at some point. Was curious about the Malala. We lost that grant opportunity. And when does that come around again, and what can we do to start laying track for that? It'd be nice to start now planning for that and see if we can't land that next time around.
Right.
And the last one is, and again, this is probably forward, but I had several conversations with people, and everybody likes the idea. In fact, I think it may have been Mayor Neely that initially gave me the idea, but the two conduits underneath I-205, and then there's a trestle,
Box culverts.
the box culverts. We need to be thinking forward. The Cove project is coming in, and it'd be nice to connect up some kind of a walking bike path through those conduits from connecting the Cove over to Washington, train depot, and the downtown area. Well, the downtown area could take Maine, but it'd be nice to have some thinking toward that. I don't know if it's even doable, if there's enough clearance. The UP would allow. Well, I know under I-205, but coming under the railroad tracks.
Yeah,
I mean, you could
trestles
walk
there.
under it, but there's a drainage pipe that uses that. So I don't know. I'm not a technician, so.
Those culverts drain quite a bit of area, and especially during the winter months, you wouldn't be able to have people go underneath there.
Correct. It would have to be an elevated. I don't know what the height is on the, but
I have that information somewhere, but I don't know if, depending how much water gets in there, you may not be able to.
right.
Maybe you could utilize it some part of the time, but that's kind of.
Well, they weren't designed for drainage, though. They were put in there as part of the deal when 205 went through, that the property owner wanted to be able to move his cattle from one side of the freeway to the other. And so that was designed for him.
I don't think so. I think those were designed for full flooding, like what we've seen in 1996, moving that water back and forth and having the capacity to move that. Now, there's also the serviceability of those culverts and the size. I'm not sure it was related to cattle.
You guys have that study.
Because it was never, when 205 was in, that was always landfill or quarry, right?
Yeah, when 205 was built, I was down here, and there was the only thing that was in that area when they built was the shopping center and the dump. It was up right next to and under I-205.
Yeah, but I think the culverts were placed for a different reason.
Okay.
And the railroad crossing is really the bottleneck. I suppose if ODOT would allow and we were comfortable with a long kind of lit tunnel from a safety perspective, that the culverts could work during most times, because even though there's water flowing through there, I think it's not nearly as full as it might be in a true blue flood, right? And in a true blue flood,
All bets are off anyway.
probably won't have much pedestrian traffic at the cove.
In a true blue
we don't
flood,
have flash floods here. So.
in a true blue flood, the railroad track's underwater.
Yeah, but I think during a majority of just about every winter, I think Sedemare is correct. It's not the ODOT tunnel, it's the railroad crossing, because that's much lower, and it always holds water at that location where it's, so I've looked at this and I got pictures of it in the wintertime and in the summertime. Somehow there'd have to be not an undercrossing, but an overcrossing to get to
And
the Amtrak side of the site.
I think the plate elevation is 20 feet over the rails to the bottom of anything.
20 feet over the rails. You mean for an overcrossing? Yeah. So it's kind of a weird, it would be, but I've heard this idea before. I've heard it from the mayor, and I've heard it from Dan Feller, and I think I've heard it from you, Blaine. So it's an idea that's out there. I don't believe it's a route that's on our transportation system plan or the regional plan. So there is the question always when they're not on those plans, how do we compete for funding for that, especially when, we're trying to get other projects done.
And it would also have to be handicap accessible.
Yeah. So, but we can bring you more, maybe, I don't know I think there's big thinkers that are thinking, there's a solution here, kind of like those, I hear every once in a while, well, why can't we straighten out 99E and, eliminate these S-curves as we come through the tunnel? You hear those, and it's a question of how much energy do you put into that kind of a discussion. This one isn't nearly that complicated, but it is complicated, so, and it's questionable about whether or not we could fund something like that, so. Might be a good field trip, especially in the wintertime.
In the dry season.
I have a couple.
Yeah.
We'll get you a boat. We'll bring a boat instead of cars.
Well, and obviously it's just something to think about, and at least get some basic information about it, which sounds like you have some. But
Yeah.
Bob's got a couple
Okay,
questions.
One thing I wanted to say, since Blaine brought it up, though, before you, Bob.
go ahead and interrupt.
The Leland Lynn Myers update.
That is going to the city commission, I think before, I can't remember when our next meeting is, but it's scheduled to be at the city commission on the 19th. And right now, the indications are we're going to ask for another continuance while we can put more study effort into further refinement of the roundabout idea. So at the commission meeting that we went to for adoption of the concept plan, there was a fair amount of information added to the record from one of the property owners and their tenant and their tenant's engineer. So we agree, we looked at that information and said, we probably do, this is a concept plan. We could probably throw some more effort at that intersection to determine whether or not a roundabout is the right solution or if there's other options. Because the roundabout has been on the books for probably 10 years. And we just want to scrutinize that. One of the things that we adopted through our transportation system plan was a intersection congestion standard that's essentially lowered the standard, if you will, instead of raised the standard, so it allows for more congestion and more queuing, and basically allows for more delay at intersections. And in this TSP, we didn't analyze that particular intersection. We analyzed 20 different intersections around the city through the TSP, and what we heard from our consultant was they moved that roundabout forward, and rather than completing a full analysis there. So now the question is, well, if we look at our new standard, which allows for more congestion, is there truly a need for that roundabout? So those are details that we want to,
we meet
based
the
on
night
the question
before.
that's come out.
We meet the night before the commission.
Okay.
So
Well,
we're meeting on the 18th, commission's on the 19th.
so I'll be able to update you on that, but I was worried we were going to miss that date somehow, and you wouldn't know that we were meeting. We're going to be sharing some of that storyline with the city commission on the 19th.
Pavement at Gaffney Lane on that, that's great.
You're not gonna make
They
it, Bob.
connected that one section
Yeah,
on
in there.
Myers.
Yeah.
So it's, has a
Oh.
shoulder now.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. No
Yeah,
worries.
it's wonderful.
That was
glad you-
another one of those in-house projects.
Yeah.
That,
Raise your hand, Bob.
I noticed in Portland
Uh-huh.
some new designs for crosswalks, which can only be used when you have a center left turn lane width on the road.
Mhm.
But what it does is offset the route of the pedestrians with the concrete structure, so that when they get to the center lane, they have to turn right, and then they're facing the oncoming traffic, so they're more aware of oncoming traffic, and then they can cross the rest of the crosswalk. And I couldn't figure out why that configuration was, but then I finally figured out that's the reason for it. It's a much, much safer crosswalk when you have the room to build that kind of a structure. That's something you might look into.
They have a center island for the pedestrian to make that jog.
Yes,
Yeah,
right.
they've got the
Concrete
right of way
structures.
through there. Yeah.
And it also would be good for a person.
I'll tell you, my
in a,
wife's a transportation planner for PBOT. We will not be adopting any of their standards. Just out of
You're certain
there
of
will
that?
be a severance of. I'm just joshing with you.
Well, it's very, very good for people in wheelchairs too. Very good.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of those actually.
Yeah, they're
They
pretty.
I
pretty
like
neat.
that.
And then also,
where did you see it at, Bob? I haven't seen
that
it.
was out on Southeast Division.
There's one out
just
by
probably
the-
about 130th and Division, Southeast Division, and there's a couple more going further out. So I don't usually travel in that part of the country, but that's where my wife's hairdresser is, so I had to.
There's one of those out there by the Keller Auditorium.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Another question I have is, on your budget, do you have any more of those flashing crossings put into your budget, like over there by the Carnegie Library?
We do. We have one budgeted for this year, and it's actually scheduled for installation as soon as we finish what's called our punch list for our PMUF projects. So we go through and line item any things that the contractors that came in this summer and did the asphalt work. We tell them, well, you got to fix this, this, and that. As soon as we get them to button down all of their items, so there's no pointing fingers of, oh, well, your crosswalk did this or your work did that, we're going to go in and do our next RRF rectangular rapid flashing RRFB installation, and that'll be at 12th and Washington on the downhill side of Washington. And that is a budgeted acquisition that we have for this year. And
I've noticed the one that we have now, I've spent some time up on that corner recently, and I don't think even 50% of the people push the button to engage those lights. I wonder if there's any way that could be a bigger notification or sign or something to get the people, the pedestrians' attraction to push
Do you
that
think
button.
it's that they don't notice, or do you think it's just that, because I notice a lot of people just almost like, that's government telling me what to do and won't do it, so.
I don't think it's because they don't want to do it, because I've seen several mothers with their children, and they're usually very careful, especially in a crosswalk like that, so busy. So I just don't think they're used to I guess you'd call it a different traffic pattern. It's my observation.
are they're using the actual location where the beacons are at, or are they crossing on the downhill side?
No, they're crossing where the beacons are.
I'll take a look at the signs that are out there and see if I can
Yeah.
do anything to those.
So I have a question for those. Is there ones that somehow they have a sensor, they notice the presence of individual, and then they will engage the signal automatically?
I haven't seen anything like that. They have the Bluetooth capable ones where you don't have to wired connect them to one another. I have not seen any that
Motion detector.
or like a motion detector device.
I was going through a town
That's not to say
Saturday.
there isn't out there. I haven't seen it.
I was going through a town Saturday, and I seen one flashing, but I never saw anybody around.
Well, one of the adjustments that we made on this one was you'd press the button and the flashing action lasted too long, I thought. So we talked to our guys, and they adjusted that so that it wouldn't last so long.
Because I went by that place a couple times, and that's what it was. It wasn't in this state, it was another state. But,
Well, I've noticed
they
those
do it
out
wrong
on
in the other
Division, they
states.
last quite a bit longer after the pedestrians have crossed them too, so.
Yeah, I think, that just kind of frustrates the drivers too, so I'd like to keep that, appropriately timed for a pedestrian that's walking across the
but
road.
it did slow us all down, because it was a 25, and we were doing 40, and we dropped down to 35, and then coming around the corner, and they were flashing. We saw the traffic slow down. I thought I'd better get down to 25 too. Ready to adjourn? Anything else to talk about? Let's adjourn.
Yay!
All right.
I